What would make you want to move nearly 4,000 miles across the globe? It's a big question, but one North Carolina woman, Alex Essery, and her husband are currently seriously pondering. And why, of all places, make that move to the little Isle of Man? Hi, it's Siobhán, one of the journalists up at Manx Radio, and welcome to the latest edition of our newscast. So I guess, first of all, could you introduce yourself for me? So just your full name and whereabouts you're based over in the States?
Absolutely. So my name is Alex Essery, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, which, for those of you who might not be familiar, is kind of like the southeast part of the United States, and we're in the mountains, and it's a beautiful area.
Perfect. And we'll get into this in a second, but you're actually debating moving here to the Isle of Man, which, speaking to you from the Isle of Man, it's also a beautiful part of the world. But first of all, what's prompting that move for you?
Absolutely. So that's such a good question. It's such a big one. So it really started a couple of years ago when our closest, dearest friends moved to Germany. And they really just had this sense of like peace and this loss of anxiety and stress that we sort of live with constantly as Americans. And they really have been encouraging us, like, why don't you come over? You need to leave. Like, it's going to be so much better for you. Just like get out. And, I told them, like, happy to come visit you in Germany. We went and saw them last Christmas and did the Christmas markets with them, which was lovely. But I, don't want to move somewhere that speaks German. It's a different language, right? So I started Googling and looking into, like, okay, well, what are my options? And then this, wonderful country in the middle of the Irish Sea popped up, and I'm like, I don't even know where that is. Kind of from there, I just kept reading more and following things on social media and joining the different Isle of Man Facebook groups. And then, along with our friends that live in Germany, all four of us went and visited your beautiful country this past April. And it was just so lovely, so beautiful. And the people were so incredibly welcoming and kind. And it just really opened up our eyes to, like, what the possibilities could be.
I guess I find that really interesting that you knew nothing about the Isle of Man when you first looked us up. Like, because I was sort of expecting you to go, yeah, we're really big fans of the TT.
No, I know. Most people, like, when we came over in April, we had people coming up to us in the pubs and asking, well, this isn't the TT. Why are you here? Because they heard our accent. Are you visiting someone? And I'm like, nope. It's our first time. We love it so far. What should we see? What should we do? We're so happy to be here.
So you were saying that you're sort of living with a lot of anxiety over in the US. Did you expect this year's election to go the way it went? Were you expecting maybe Harris to win instead? What was your reaction this week, I suppose, with the election?
Yeah, with the election, I'm not surprised that it went the way it did, but I am disappointed and, honestly, to be perfectly frank, rather disgusted. It's scary as an American with, friends in the LGBTQ population, people of color, people who look different. And with the election going the way it did, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety, having friends reach out and messaging each other yesterday being like, hey, are you physically safe? Are you okay? And then our options as women with this news is basically like, well, you can either take some self-defense classes, you can arm yourself, or you can leave the country. And just having that as a reality of our day to day of like, okay, are we safe? Is this okay? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned you're based out in North Carolina, which obviously went overall Republican as well. And I suppose in the context, of it being kind of a southern state as well. I mean, some of the stuff you said, there's, people may react to, the idea that you feel so unsafe that's a bit of a dramatic response. Is that, that's the reality you're actually living with there in the sort of deep South?
It is. I'm in Asheville. It's really an unusual situation and unusual culture that we kind of, we're this blue, very liberal, very Democrat city, but we are surrounded by more rural, more Republican leaning communities. So when we're in Asheville, generally speaking, it's a very welcoming environment. But then you drive 30, 45 minutes out and you're seeing Confederate flags, which for Americans, that's kind of a symbol of white supremacy and, violence towards people of color. So It is. It is absolutely a part of my life.
And also, you mentioned you've been in the path of a couple of major weather events as well recently. So, how did you fare in those instances?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. Yes, so I think we're on week 7. I want to say 7 weeks ago, we were hit by Hurricane Helene, which is a lot. Like, it's been a kind of a 1-2 punch over the last month, and I'm still living without water. I'm really fortunate that I have power and that my home was on higher ground. So I had some flooding in my basement, but I didn't lose my house. My house didn't get washed away. But yeah, I mean, I'm still without water. Which is, it's like the little things, like how much water does it take to make mashed potatoes, right? Like, it's like the little things every day.
I mean, you say the little things, but I think everyone could agree it's quite major to be living without running water. In what is kind of a first world country, quote unquote. I mean, has the sort of state response, federal response been okay for you where you are? Are you relatively doing okay in comparison to other parts of the state?
I would say that Asheville is bouncing back quicker than some of the surrounding smaller towns that are still kind of living in devastation. I don't know. I think even Americans, I was talking to someone yesterday on a work call, and, she was chatting and asking how things were going. And I was kind of laughing and saying, well, I haven't taken a shower in 4 days. And she's like, well, why? And I'm like, well, we still don't have water. So I think even the rest of the country doesn't really understand that we're still living in this place of crisis on this daily, how do we get by? How do we, wash our dishes? How do we cook our food? Because of this situation. So having the news, the election going the way it did kind of felt like this, like, okay, 1-2 punch, here we go. Let's think about the Isle of Man again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting as well. You talk about. I mean, I work in news, obviously, but the news cycle just moves on so quickly, and you kind of don't. I think in the wider range of things, people maybe lose sight of the fact that this was a devastating hurricane that went all the way across, the South of America and the South America as well. And then it moved very quickly onto the election cycle, but that's the reality people are still living with, I suppose.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So okay. Then jumping back to the Isle of Man, then, which honestly fascinates me that you'd never even heard of the TT, which I know you said that people here were telling you that why are you here, especially in April? Yeah. Did you hit bad weather when you were over? I'm trying to remember what it was like in April.
Yeah, we were here. We were actually on the island during what was it called? Storm Kathleen, I think. So.
Right. So probably a different experience of a storm to what you've then had later.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year in terms of weather for me. That's for sure. But I mean, being there in April, like, even with the weather and the wind being particularly ferocious, I mean, we really loved our time there. I remember sitting on the beach on Peel and just feeling this like sense of calm and sense of peace, and being like, wow, like I feel like I can really like breathe, for the first time in a really, really long time. So that's kind of, when we started thinking about like, okay, what would this look like? Is this a possibility for us to choose a life of peace and tranquility, even knowing that the weather can be an interesting part of your life as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure I saw as well that comments wise on your post, a lot of people were telling you, some of the things that we tackle with here, health spending, a lot of things that have been kind of top of our radar on the Isle of Man, but maybe in comparison to some of the things you're dealing with, it wouldn't even be on the same scale. So I suppose, have you sort of started looking into making that move then and making it a reality?
We have. We know that it's going to be. I mean, there are lots of things up in the air, right? Like, it's not something we can just snap our fingers and make happen. I think in a lot of ways it's in the hands of God and the immigration board over there. So if you're listening, please consider letting us come on over.
It's really interesting, I think, seeing the outside perspective of someone who wants to move here. Because like I say, people have various complaints about different elements on the island, but actually from an outside perspective, it being so appealing is really interesting.
I think one thing that really hit me yesterday as well, just kind of adding on to why the Isle of Man is so special, is, I posted that on Facebook, and I think this morning I checked and I had 130 responses. And then I had, I think, maybe like 5 or 6 people reach out to me via direct messages, just offering their help. I had a gentleman reach out to me via direct message, basically saying, I can't help you with the job and with the visa, but once you get over here, I'll take you out to dinner. Like, that's not something that would happen in the United States. Like, that's not the kind of community and just open arms attitude. And so I'm really grateful, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been so kind and welcoming.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.